The seller just had the number in their head that they wanted to make. I mean, they weren't willing to listen to any other structure with it. Tried to get through that process, couldn't get through it. Deal fell apart. And at that point, I think I was 14 months into the search process. Devastating, right? Like, it's like, okay, feel like I'm back at square one.
Search Party is sponsored by Avid Bank, Boulay, Mayer Brown, Plexus Capital, and Oberle. The lead sponsor is Next Coast Legacy. Hello and welcome to Search Party. I'm David Snow, your host. And today we're joined by Markus Scott. Markus is the CEO of EyeQ Monitoring. He is also an entrepreneur through acquisition. We're going to hear all about Markus's journey into the ETA world, how he came to acquire EyeQ with partners, and how it's going. So first of all, Markus, great to have you here. I can't wait to delve into your story.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me.
So Markus, why don't we begin by learning about you personally? Where are you from? What do we need to know about your early years?
Background for me, grew up in a middle-class family in Gainesville, Florida, 5 kids. Still not sure how my parents survived. Parents, one was an engineer, one was an educator and principal. Went to school at the University of Florida in my hometown, played sports, football in particular. Excited to talk about now. It's been a couple of rough years for us, so I usually keep that a secret. But
Markus, what position did you play in football?
Well, I'll use the word play very lightly. I'm still a linebacker and a fullback. Same pounds, but a lot of muscle ago. So.
Oh, linebacker. Okay. Good to know. I'm going to come back to that. Thank you.
My dad, despite being an educator, always had a side business. When he first started his career, he started off in the engraving business after he got done with football and had a little time in the NFL and CFL. My father's African-American, really should have had the opportunity to take over that business, didn't because of the color of his skin. So he jumped out and started his own engraving business in addition to being an educator to provide for our family. And he still runs that business today. Watching him kind of build that and run that certainly had an impact on me in early years. Always wanted to jump in and build something for just the joy of building something, but also for my family in the future.
Sorry, did you say your father was in the NFL?
Yeah. So he and one of my brothers actually spent time in the NFL.
And what were their names?
Randy Scott and Ian Scott. So my dad played for the Chargers back in the early 80s, but my much larger brother, he's a 6'3", 350-pound version of me, got drafted by the Chicago Bears in 2003 and played in the NFL for 7 years.
Markus, you've got quite a football pedigree. And of course, before we end this interview, I want to learn about how football has sort of affected the way you think about ambition and accomplishing things.
When I was at UF, knew I needed to do something besides football. Asked a lot of people what I should be studying, ended up in finance, but then got an opportunity to actually go and work in public accounting. They actually paid for me to get a master's in accounting at the University of Virginia. If you can see the relative colleges back here. And then over the years, ended up in private equity and went back to business school specifically to raise a search fund, oddly enough. Promised my wife no more degrees at this point, but that was the arc of education for me.
So were you aware of ETA as a career path before you entered the MBA program?
So worked at Ernst & Young and then PwC. PwC is kind of where I really started to fall in love with the idea of private equity as a place where I could learn how to really run a business, grow a business. And so got an opportunity to go work with one of our clients, Broccoli Marana Partners down in South Florida. Wonderful firm, loved my time there, but it definitely accelerated that entrepreneurial bug. I thought I'd kind of wait until I had a big enough nest egg and, security to go try to start something else. But while I was in private equity, I started looking at small businesses, the nights and weekends I wasn't sleeping under my desk, that I might be able to pool a little bit of capital with my family and friends together to go buy. Investment opportunity for the firm hit my desk, which was a business focused on the methadone clinic space. So treating kind of pain addictions. And that was run by 2 folks out of Stanford that raised a search fund. Got to know the model through that process and just fell in love with it. It kind of checked all of my boxes. So went back to the partners who were, asking me to stay on at the time and told them about my conviction there and decision to go back to business school specifically to raise the fund. That was in 2012.
I mean, it's worth noting that young professionals who find their way into a position at a private equity firm are in pretty rare company. That's quite an accomplishment. And so for you to think about leaving that position and doing something on your own with a very different set of risks must have taken some thinking.
I could tell you had some interesting conversations. So the first one was the conversation with my wife saying, hey, I want to move off of this beach in South Florida to go not have an income to hopefully find a business that may be successful. That was an interesting conversation. Fortunately, she was supportive, but then also family as well, right? To your point, private equity, especially the level of difficulty to get opportunities to get into that space, which was not lost on me at all. That was a big kind of conversation on why you're leaving this opportunity in this space to go do something that has a lot of risk behind it potentially. At the time, didn't have kids. Certainly our living standard had grown from my first job at Ernst & Young, but felt like I could take on that level of risk in that point of my career to go pursue this dream. And answering that question for me on whether or not I could do it and whether or not I would be successful felt like something that I would live with more than, hey, you don't find a business to buy. Hey, you buy a business that doesn't go well and you go back to hopefully working in that industry as a fallback. So, for me, the timing was appropriate. I felt like that was less risky, frankly, versus not answering that question. Sit here today, very glad that I decided to go pursue this pathway.
It sounds like you were almost weighing two forms of regret against each other.
I actually sat down. I had a great consulting professor at the University of Virginia that talked about making decision trees when you're faced with these kind of hard points in life. And I sat down and I did a decision tree on both, right? What are the outcomes of these two pathways that I have? And this pathway and being able to take off a couple of years to go back to business school, try to raise the fund. If I don't raise the fund, go back to private equity. Hopefully, if I do, go, spend another 2 years looking for a business to buy. I was prepared for potential outcome there that I was going to spend, 10 years chasing after something that didn't pan out. And to me, that was a worthwhile risk point relative to being able to have the opportunity to go build something really special.
So in 2012, what was the level of awareness of ETA? Was there a club or was it sort of like a fringe movement?
It was very fringe in 2012. So yes, Kellogg had a half day of one class that actually raised the topic of search funds. I started doing research around just the community around Kellogg with ETA up to that point, and they're really wildly successful pedigree, right? Dustin, for instance, was on that list. I just started picking up the phone and calling all of those people, Mike Smirklow, and trying to get intel from those guys on, pathways. And they were all wonderfully helpful to me as I was investigating the pathway and figuring out how I could get it done. But I had to go build all of that. And today, it's really exciting. I still help out at Kellogg. They've got a really thriving program around ETA. The community has embraced it in some really exciting ways. And obviously that program has grown. Very entrepreneurial start to raising the fund, Kellogg back then, which I think helped prepare me for the process of actually finding a business.
Markus, help us understand sort of the sequence of steps that you took towards raising a fund to back your search for a company, which ultimately ended up being EyeQ Monitoring. How did that unfold?
Hit the ground running. First order of business for me was, do I want to find a partner or not? So I started talking to people, which was funny back then because I was educating people on the ETA model and, this crazy idea that I had and, still talking to private equity firms in case I couldn't raise the money. But as I started to do that, I started to get introduced to more and more folks in the community, which is one of the things I love about, the search fund space as a whole. It's just a very tight-knit community. My wife actually got pregnant. So we've been talking about it, trying for years. We finally did. And so was managing that. I had a pregnant wife. I was doing research, getting prepared to start the process. The winter break, actually sat down and started writing my offering memorandum. And then the private equity VC conference that Kellogg puts on every year in January was the place I did my first pitch. And then I went on a roadshow to Boston, roadshow to San Francisco. Fortunately, was able to start raising the fund. Had a daughter right before I started that process in January. A lot of it was just talking to the right folks who then said, hey, I've got these 3 or 4 other people that are ex-searchers that I'd like to introduce you to. And community was wonderfully helpful in me getting the deal done.
For someone who doesn't totally understand how these search funds work, and this is the pool of money designed to sort of pay for your living expenses for 2 years while you're looking for an appropriate company, help people understand how the whole thing works.
Yeah, standard ETA model. And I, had a bias to go after people that understood the search model. I did actually bring in a couple of my partners from the private equity firm that I used to work with as well, who were interested in backing me in the process. But yeah, I went to that community, general kind of down the strike zone model. Hey, I'm going to raise this much capital that's going to kind of fund me, supporting my family during this process. Look full time for a business to acquire. I'll bring that opportunity to you when I find that business and give you a first right of refusal to invest alongside me. And in exchange, would like to, be able to get some sweat equity in the business over the years if it goes well. Yeah, fortunately, worked out and was able to raise the fund and get it all closed kind of in the spring semester. So I started early February and I was done and fully committed in April. Was very excited and relieved that people were willing to write me checks after, a couple conversations of getting to know me, not really having a business to invest in, right? So they're just investing in you as a searcher.
And how much did you raise?
I was very conservative. I think I raised a total of $360,000, but I think the standard now is 600 or so. 600,000 that people raised. I was very focused on running a very efficient search process and was willing to take some cuts to the living standard during this 2 years just to be very efficient with my capital usage.
Let's take a quick break to learn about a partner for growth in the lower middle market, Plexus Capital. Every Plexus Capital investment begins with a foundation of trust. The team approaches all partnerships through the lens of its CARE values, grounding principles that guide the team's decision-making. Care about our people. Always do what's right. Respect each other and our partners. Expect excellence. Plexus Capital has been providing debt and equity capital to lower middle market businesses since 2005 and began partnering with the search community in 2010. Since inception, the firm has deployed over $2.4 billion into over 190 small businesses. Given the team's expertise and track record, you could say Plexus Capital has large firm capabilities with a small deal focus. Look for commentary from Plexus Capital professionals in episodes of Search Party. Okay, now back to the episode. Excellent, Markus. So let's fast forward to the part where you're now out there looking for a company to buy. You are armed with a roughly $300,000 search fund. What were you looking for?
Yeah, so part of this for me was finding a business in an industry that I felt passionate about, or that had a mission that I felt passionate about. And in private equity, I spent a lot of time in healthcare, and so I raised capital with a lot of folks with healthcare experience because that was kind of a primary industry for me to be focused on. Education, I also sat on the board of a education technology business and loved that space. We could be finding ways to improve people's health or improve educational outcomes, great ways to spend your day. And the last one that I started looking at was security, right? Protecting people and their assets. Likewise, great mission, great way to spend your day. So I started looking at those three industries primarily.
Before we get to the part where you actually buy and become CEO of the business, just talk about the highs and lows of your search process.
There's a lot of adjustment and lowlights that you have to be prepared for. I mentioned this decision on having a search partner or not. I ended up landing on searching individually. That's a fairly lonely process, right? And so every day, kind of your success is, did you buy a company today or not? So it's a little binary, as you can imagine. So I had to get very good at the lows of that, right? You're kind of 3 months in, 6 months in, you're talking to your classmates who've gone on and taken all of these jobs that are very visible. They're getting promoted and they're asking you what you're up to. And like, yeah, no, I called on a lot of small businesses again this week, right? So you have to manage those kind of lows, and just in terms of the ambiguity again and the loneliness of the process. I think this is an important, call it failure point, but tripping point in the search process is when you lose your first big deal. I had a business under letter of intent in the security space. Had done all of the work, loved the business, got into deep due diligence, had a great relationship with the seller of the business. He bought my kids, dolls. The deal was largely done. But in due diligence, we found an issue with revenue recognition that brought the number down a little bit in terms of EBITDA. And at the time, felt like we needed to kind of push forward on some structure in order to account for that change. But the seller just had the number in their head that they wanted to make. They weren't willing to listen to any other structure with it. Tried to get through that process, couldn't get through it. Deal fell apart. And at that point, I think I was 14 months into the search process. Devastating, right? It's like, okay, feel like I'm back at square one here. I've done all of the work of getting our investor base up to speed on this industry and this niche, built all these relationships, had this deal that I thought was going to close. Now it's not. Where do I go from here? So that's a hard point that I think is really, really important for every researcher to know is going to come and to be okay with. But it prepared me for getting this deal closed, frankly, and even kind of pressure testing where I wanted to spend time, the relationships I needed to be successful with this business out of the gate. There's a ton of great value that came out of that process, but a real low. And then the high, obviously, here is getting this deal done. I would say that high did not last very long. So I was excited to get this deal done.
We're definitely going to get into that. Maybe one or two quick follow-up questions for you with regard to the deal that got away. How close were you to saying, screw it, I'm going to do this deal because I've come this far and I got to get some sort of deal done, otherwise my window of opportunity is going to close?
Yeah. You know what? In the grand scheme of things, it probably would have been fine. But I think that's one of the lessons, right? I see this in searchers all the time. You've got folks that have a bend towards being super aggressive, right? And you have a group of folks that bend towards being super conservative. I was on the latter side of things. Think about my background. I started in, public accounting, doing audits and due diligence, right? What are all the problems that this business could have? I went into private equity, had to lose some of that dynamic to understand that pretty much every business has hair on it. I do think what you pay matters, but it's not what moves the needle in success. What you do with that business after the fact is what really drives return. So, but getting comfortable with that, understanding that when I got to this business, I think it redirected me. And frankly, this opportunity has ended up way better than that one would have because of some of those lessons learned on what risk I was willing to accept to get a deal closed or not.
So let's talk about EyeQ Monitoring. How did you come across the business and what were the initial talks with the founder like?
Actually, in that deal that I lost, I was starting to spend a lot of time around the types of businesses that company was serving. And that's kind of the initial introduction to me around this industry, which is called the remote video monitoring space. So the business that I was looking at buying was a central station is what they call it, but it's the businesses that monitor all of the alarms coming from your home, from your business. The ADTs of the world have this functionality built with inside of their company, but most security alarm providers outsource it to a company like the one I had under LOI. One of the businesses they work with was trying to get into this idea of, virtual security guards. So rather than having a guard out on a property, how do you actually take cameras and underlying AI to automate a lot of that process, or at least centralize it versus having a human guard walking around your property? When I started spending more time around that space through that process, ended up finding this business, which at the time was called National Video Monitoring. Fortunately, it was in my backyard. I was searching in Atlanta. This business was about an hour south of Atlanta, but it was tiny. So versus the 1 to 5 million of EBITDA that we were setting out to go acquire, this business had a total of 1 million of annual recurring revenue. But it was a very small business in an industry that I thought had a lot of positive tailwinds behind it, just between where the technology stack was versus where it was going, and this offering being more widely available to the marketplace as we move forward. So I decided to push on it and met the seller at a trade show in the fall of 2014, started to build a relationship, a whole lot of learnings through that process, but got the deal closed in May 2015.
Can you talk briefly about the founder of EyeQ Monitoring and why that founder was interested in a possible change of ownership?
Founder at the time was 65. So they were thinking about what they wanted to do from a retirement career standpoint. They had been in the business since 2007. So they'd been building that company for the better part of 7 years, and it had gotten bigger than anything they thought it would be. But I do think there was at least an initial point of kind of connection where, hey, I'm able to, one, get paid well for this business. But two, kind of pass this along to somebody that can shepherd it on. There are a lot of business owners out there in the world who want to see the business and the team thrive. They want to move on, but they would love to hand it off to somebody that can continue that legacy and kind of be like a family member to them and to the team, and see that business continue to do well versus selling to a strategic that's going to change a lot of things, or a private equity firm that's going to bring in an owner, CEO that they don't know well. A lot of that stuff resonated with this seller, and was able to get the deal closed.
Did you have any investors who felt that this acquisition was too small?
Surprisingly, no. So I thought that would be the case, just given the size of the business. But as we started to evaluate it, everybody got a lot of conviction really quickly about the growth wins behind the business. And so ended up being oversubscribed. People were actually very intrigued by the industry. They were very intrigued by the opportunity. The biggest kind of pushback early on was, how are you going to raise capital to close the deal? And I'll say this, I tell people this all the time, got some of the best advice. Probably one of the reasons we're standing here today at that point, which one of the investors came forward and said, listen, where I see small businesses fail is they run out of cash. So I would highly, highly advise you do a deal that's all equity, even though we had, terms from lenders. And I would also advise you to go ahead and get a commitment for growth capital from the investor base today, just to make sure you can see through any challenges that you might have in the first 24 months. At the time I was worried about kind of diluting the business and over-equitizing it, but decided to move forward with that advice. And it made all of the difference in the world after our first 12 months when we needed to pull that capital.
It's notable that the investment in EyeQ was a bit more of what you might call like a growth investment, or even like a VC style investment, which is different than sort of your classic ETA deal, which tends to be more sort of lower middle market, cash flow positive types of businesses. It sounds like your investors were very supportive of a type of deal that wasn't like a regular way LBO.
Yeah, and I would say our story is unique in that, right? I do think it's important for people to understand that the search fund community, by and large, is very much a cash flow investor LBO kind of model, right? That's really what it's geared for, versus a business, and organic growth, by the way, versus a business that's really geared towards programmatic acquisitions, high capital intensity, growth stage, levels of cash burn. So we were a little bit unique in that we really were a growth equity business, but our industry was still nascent enough where there wasn't a lot of growth capital available to the market. That gave us a little bit of an opportunity to scale the business more slowly than probably we otherwise should have been.
Okay, so let's get to the nitty gritty of what happened after you became the CEO of EyeQ. You spent a while looking for the right business. You acquired it. Everyone's excited. You take the reins of the business, and then what happens?
Well, yeah, this is the place where I should be pouring bourbon, probably, just stories. So, yeah, no, I had a very funny start overall to my role as CEO. During the search process, we found a few things with the business and the seller that certainly suggested some integrity issues, right? Felt like we could paper around some of that risk. Found out, and certainly have the conviction today, that you can't paper around a lack of integrity. Had just a whole list of terrible things happen in the first kind of 90 to 120 days related to that and other things. So the day the deal closed, got a report of sexual harassment right out of the gate that happened first night that we owned the business, which was terrifying for me as a first-time operator that I had to deal with. The second week on the deal, a virus hit our servers that prevented us from sending out what are called incident reports. So if somebody breaks into your property, we have to call the police and prepare a report. We couldn't send those out. And our IT manager, who happened to be the person that had the sexual harassment charge, right, couldn't solve what to do with it. So had to go get an outside IT person that used to work for the business, who ended up actually being the person that put the virus on the servers. The bookkeeper for the business, and week 3 decided to announce to all of our customers the transaction without talking to me first, and then was upset about it when I called them out on it and quit on the spot. And so I found myself sending out invoices and, measuring stuff in the first month of the deal. And then fast forward into month 2, we had found a lot of stuff that the seller had hidden during due diligence, bad relationships with customers, things that needed to be fixed that I started to uncover, which caused a lot of tension, obviously. And they thought they could go set up a competing business underneath their wife and get around the non-solicits and non-competes that we had in place. And so by month 3, I was also in litigation with the seller. So that was my first 90 days on the job. I would not recommend it to anybody. A lot of learnings on things I should have done better and different. But what I got right and what I was blessed with was what a great board that supported me through that process, understood I was a first-time operator and kind of getting my skis underneath me, and were patient as I was getting through that. The good news, though, is it made me kind of get my arms around the business early. I visited with all the customers. I figured out things that we needed to be doing. I scanned checks then, whatever needed to be done. I built relationships, really deep relationships with our team and trying to solve issues for them. And it's the reason we're standing here today.
Excellent. So there was definitely a baptism of fire for you in becoming CEO of the company. But let's talk about some happier things. What do you think were some of the most impactful moves that you made that helped the company grow and scale?
One, we chose the industry right, really great industry, right timing, really positive trends in our sales that frankly covered over the multitude of sins out of the gate. Two, hired the right people, and kind of related to that, we spent a lot of time out of the gate really moving the culture in the right direction. Prior to joining, as I got in there, realized it was just a very toxic work environment. Folks were fighting against each other, not for our customers. And that took a little bit of time to convince people that there was a different alternative and that I was being genuine, pushing the organization that way. Once we started to do that, we cleaned house a little bit, got some other people in. You just immediately saw the impact to our team and our customers related to that. We've been very patient. It's easy, I think, as a new operator, a new leader, to go try to do everything at once. And so I've had really conviction over time to take our time, make sure we understand exactly what the implications are, and not feel like we need to get to the destination overnight. Been a frustrating process at times, but we're sitting in a better place because of it. We've had kind of three, I would tell you, big moments in time changing the direction of the business, and leading in that from a genuine place has been really important. The first one, which was taking over the business and moving the culture. The second one really was in 2020. We had spent a lot of time growing the business, team was really exhausted, and then COVID happened. And that was a really challenging year that required a lot of thoughtful and genuine leadership and building relationships. And then coming out of that, we had to pivot again to really move the culture. I think every leader is going to be tested across all of those things, right? Are you finding the points where you need to slow down and be patient? We've had that over time. And then are you moving, the vision of the organization as you scale in the right directions? I won't take all the credit for that. We've got a great team in place, but I think those are the pivotal things over the last now 10 years that have kept us moving and growing and getting to kind of the 24x size we are at today versus where we started.
Just for the record, if you came across a potential client today, how would you describe the business of EyeQ Monitoring?
We are a remote video monitoring business. What we do is we go in to your business and look at how to leverage the surveillance infrastructure, frankly, to automate your processes and help you drive more revenue, a better customer experience, and keep your assets safe. You're spending money on guards today, or you're spending money on people and personnel doing really manual tasks. We'd love to come in and be able to figure out how we can automate that for you and make you more efficient while driving a better experience. And here's the host of folks that we've worked with in the past that we've had a really positive ROI impact on, and that we'd love for you to talk to. We really started around kind of the model around virtual guarding, and we've taken that way further with our services today, where we're impacting a lot of different operational processes that improve people's lives and allow them to sleep easier at night.
Markus, you get huge credit for being attuned to AI, 9 years before the advent of ChatGPT. But at the time when you made the investment, what was your thinking about where this company could go as AI started to gain traction?
The time in 2014, the concept of, hey, automation is coming and we're going to find ways to make very human tasks more efficient. Certainly people were talking about. They didn't know exactly how to do that, but it was absolutely a part of the conversation. And this business actually got started with a water tower business, and they were sending human guards out to all these remote places just to do a quick, maintenance check. And the initial automation was, hey, let's just put a camera there because we have cellular networks now that can support this, and we'll watch it remotely for a lot less money for you if you want to do it that way. We were moving from analog cameras to digital. And yes, in 2014, people were already talking about, once you actually have an IP camera, we can start to actually measure these pixel changes, and are there things that we're going to be able to do with them? Because if we can take that same data from those pixels and automate other insight of what an operator would be looking at and thinking about with their business and build models around that, man, you know what? There's all kinds of things we can sell in to these customers to drive value. So we had a little bit of a tiered kind of thesis on what was possible that we could underwrite to, but was hopeful back in 2014 that we would be able to do a lot of really cool things with video data that frankly, we're still just scratching the surface on.
So Markus, just a couple more questions for you. I really appreciate your sharing your story with Search Party today. Just give us a sense of where the business is today and how much further you think it can go.
We've been blessed, great industry, great team. Over the last, 9.5 years, we've scaled the business kind of 24x from where we started. But the growth rate, frankly, in the industry has accelerated. So we've been very patient over time. We still have the same investors, search fund investors that we did back to day one, who all have been very happy and supportive of that growth. And so we are thinking about kind of this next, growth phase for us, which we expect to be even stronger, which is exciting for me. It's exciting for our leadership team. As hard as we have fought to grow from $1 million of annual recurring revenue to 24, pathway for us here over the next, 3 to 5 years to get to 100 is clearer than it ever has been, which is really exciting looking back on where we've come from. So for us, the focus is executing well for our customers today, continuing to add to the value proposition of what we're automating from that surveillance technology, and having the capital to really go out and be kind of the winner in the marketplace here in this next part of the growth cycle to scale the business to really exciting levels.
Okay, back to football, Markus. What did football teach you that was relevant to your ETA journey?
I'd say football was a great proving ground for me. I was at the University of Florida walk-on. I was an academic scholarship there. Was fortunate to make the team. Did not play a whole lot other than special teams and kind of being a backup linebacker and fullback. But I was up, most days at 5 a.m. to go get onto the field at 5:30, practice the way everybody else did that was playing and starting, on Saturdays, then going to the gym afterwards to work out, then going to class all day, grabbing lunch, finishing up, being back at the stadium by 3 o'clock to watch video, being on the field at 5:30 to start practice, then rushing home to go do homework. Like that was the life, which required real effort and commitment, even when you didn't necessarily see all the benefits of it on the back end. Football taught me a lot about being able to be dedicated to something that takes time, and building a business, building a great team require all of that in spades. So I think it prepared me well to burn off a lot of the nerve endings that you need to have to be successful as an operator.
Excellent. Well, Markus Scott, CEO of EyeQ Monitoring, thank you so much for speaking to Search Party today. Thank you for sharing your expertise and your journey. And I hope we can have you back on Search Party to share more expertise with our viewers.
Thank you. I love what you're doing for the community. Appreciate you having me out, and hope some of the stories, even the dark ones and low points, are great moments for people to know that it's a great pathway to pursue and a great community to be involved with.
Search Party is sponsored by Avid Bank, Boulay, Mayer Brown, Plexus Capital, and Oberle. The lead sponsor is Next Coast Legacy.